Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about finding the why in how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio. Thank you for joining me today. Today we're going to talk about, let me talk about my trip. And then I'm going to tell you about an incident on this trip that you might find interesting. So last week, I went to Puerto Rico. That's where my family's from. My father and my mother from Puerto Rico. I was born in Chicago, so by descent, I guess I am Puerto Rican, as I always tell people, but pretty much an American, right? So I like to call myself an American. That's my small joke, sorry. But anyway, so I'm in Puerto Rico doing a presentation. It was in español. Me salió muy bien. Fantástico. Came out real well. Went real well. And I remember I'm doing a full-day training program with this one very large company. And I'm pushing people. I'm pushing these salespeople to understand, why is it that they're not selling enough? Why is it that they're not closing enough deals? What is holding them back? And I go through my sales velocity equation, right? Is it the number of opportunities in your pipeline? Is it the close rate? Is it the average deal size? Do we need to shorten the sales cycle? Which of these four levers should you be pulling on to grow your sales? And then I get that one person. You know how in any presentation you give, in my case, in a workshop, there's always that one person, male or female, but there's always that one person that knows it all. You know who I'm talking about, right? There's always that one person. You walk into a room, they got their arms folded across their chest with that look on their face saying, "What can you teach me?" You know, they have that look. I know everything. What can you teach me? And I love these people because I always ask the question at the beginning, or I make the statement. Here's a statement I always make in all my workshop. I say, if you're hitting your number, if you're hitting your quota, if you're selling 100% or more of what you should be selling, in other words, you're killing your number. If you are killing your number, do not listen to anything I have to say. That's what I say. Do not listen, because if you're already successful and you're selling in a way that is successful and working for you, please do not listen to anything Victor Antonio has to say. I always say that. And I say that because I know I got a few know-it-alls in the room. Now, I then follow up and say, but if you're not hitting your number and you're struggling, you might want to listen, because maybe I can share a couple of things with you to help you increase your sales close rates. Now, what's always fascinating about that statement is that the people who are usually killing their number, the people who are really murdering their number, are always the ones that listen the most. How ironic is that? It is the people who are killing their number, who are selling beyond their quota, who always listen the most. Now, I've come to the conclusion that these people listen, or I should say, these people hit their quota and exceed their numbers because they're always listening. They're always open to learning. What I've also learned is that the know-it-alls in the room, the ones that have their arms crossed, giving you that look, what can you teach me? These are the folks that typically are never hitting their quota because they don't want to learn. See, that's irony right there. People who are doing exceptionally well are always in continuous learning mode. They want to learn more. They want to get better. Even though they're crushing their number, they still want to do more. But many know-it-alls who think they know it all, who are not hitting their number, are the most resistant to some of the training that I deliver. So I have this guy, and he's got his arms folded again across his chest, and he's got that look. And I know he's not hitting his number. I know it. He just doesn't look like a person that's hitting his number. And so finally, I kind of, sometimes as a presenter in a workshop for me, sometimes I just go at people. Do you know what I mean by go at people? I just go at them. I go Chicago on them. So I went up to the guy. I said, look, excuse me. I said, you've asked me several questions. So apparently, you're not buying what I'm selling from the front of the room because you don't think it works. And we're talking about blocking objections as a strategy. And I said, let me ask you a question. Today, what is your close rate? He says, what do you mean? I said, what's your close rate? If you were to talk to 10 customers, what's your close rate? And, he hemmed, he hawed, well, it depends. It really depends on a lot of things. I said, on average, give me a number. He said about 30%. 30% close rate. And then I asked him, I said, why don't you think you're closing more deals? Why don't you think you're selling more? Now, I know, I don't want to embarrass him, but I know he's not hitting his number. I said to him, I said, why do you think you're not hitting your number, is the question I asked. Why do you think you're not hitting your sales number? Now, if he was hitting his number, he would have said, I am hitting my number, right? But he said, here's the reason he gave me. This is beautiful. Here's why I'm doing this podcast, because this answer was special. He said, Victor, and he said this with much confidence and much bravado. He said, the reason I'm not hitting my number or selling as much as I should be selling is because, wait for it, here it comes, the competition, he says, is stealing my clients. That's why. My competitors are stealing my clients. That's why I'm not selling as I should be selling. And I looked at him, I said, hey, I'm in disbelief. I'm just like, I got to be honest. Sometimes you have vertigo when you're talking. You're like, what did you just say? And he said, the competitor is stealing my clients. And in my mind, it's just like, it's like locked up. It's like a Gordian knot. I can't think straight. And then when I finally regained my mental composure, I said, your competitors are not stealing your clients. You're losing them. And he looked at me like, what do you mean? I said, let me say it again so everybody else could hear it again. Competitors do not steal clients. You lose them. You, my friend, have lost them. There is something that you didn't do or did do that you lost them. The competitor didn't steal. That's impossible. Competitors cannot steal your clients. You can only lose them. And I can tell he was a little annoyed by my statement. And I said, well, the question now becomes, if you accept responsibility for that statement, kind of what I said, if you accept responsibility that you've lost them, they weren't stolen, you lost them, what can you do to prevent that from happening? And he gave me some wishy-washy answer. I said, well, that's the reason we're here today, I said. We're here to learn how to actually not only gain clients, but also retain those clients. Because I'm all about gain and retain. Gain the client, retain the client, grow the client, keep the client. That's my formula, right? Gain, retain, grow, keep forever. And so in that session, I really wanted to drive home the point that you have to take personal responsibility. When you're not selling, don't find someone else to blame it on, like the competitors. Don't find something else to blame it on. Well, we don't have the right product. Or don't blame the individual customer. Well, that's not the right customer. That's why I'm not selling. See, that's losing language. Let me say that again. That's losing language. When you blame the product, you blame the service, you blame the competitor, or you blame the client, that's losing language. That is a losing language for a losing salesperson. See, you have to own up to why you're not making those sales happen. And as soon as you accept that responsibility, that no one is stealing customers from you, you're losing them, now you begin a whole new line of investigation. In other words, you start investigating, well, why am I losing them? See, now you're asking a real question. Why am I losing clients? Why am I not closing? And once you have that attitude, that mindset, you begin to look for things that maybe you're doing in your presentation that you should be doing or you shouldn't be doing. But keep in mind, you never lose clients. In other words, they're never taken from you. You've lost them because you simply didn't serve them. Maybe they weren't the ideal client. Maybe they weren't, again, somebody who fit your customer profile fit. Whatever it may be, the bottom line is nobody steals clients. You lose them. Learn to own up to the fact that maybe you're doing something wrong. It's not about the competitor. It's not about the client. It's not about the product. It's not about the service. It's maybe what you're doing. And that's the point I wanted to drive home with this guy. Now, at the end of the workshop, I think he finally started getting it. He started warming up to me, if I can be so, polite. But I can still sense that there was some resistance. And I know that that guy is going to go home and not do anything I taught that day, which means when he wakes up tomorrow or wakes up next year, he's going to be in the same situation he was in before. Because again, unless you accept personal accountability for your inability to close a deal, you'll never learn how to close a deal. And that is it for the Sales Influence Podcast. Don't forget to leave me some feedback on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. Let me know what you think. I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, as you know, I have an online sales training platform, the Sales Velocity Academy. 40 plus courses, over 400 videos. You get access to my books, a lot of notes that you can download. So if you're serious about increasing your sales velocity, go to salesvelocityacademy.com. That's salesvelocityacademy.com. Lastly, I want to thank you for listening. This is Victor Antonio, always reminding you, selling ain't hard when you know how. Take care. Hi, I'm Victor Antonio. I'm an author, sales trainer, and keynote speaker. I'm often asked, what makes a great speaker? Is it someone who delivers real content that the audience can use? Is it someone who engages the audience so they're part of the learning experience? Or is it someone who can motivate an audience to push them beyond their comfort zone and discover new abilities? The answer is yes. But the most important thing to remember is that I'm not there to look good. I'm there to make my client look good. Simply put, it's never about me, and it's always about them.